Hello and welcome to Diecast Restos. I'm Jason and this is a Lesney Matchbox Major Pack number 3 Tank Transporter and Mark III Centurion tank. This comprehensive set was in production from 1959 until 1966. It consists of a Thornycroft Antar tractor, a Sankey 50-ton trailer and a Centurion Mark III tank. This was donated to me by Tony Hughes, as indicated by the label on the base, a long-time supporter of this channel. Defects are mostly limited to the tank, including a broken turret barrel and missing tracks, but the transporter is also suffering from significant paint loss and rusted axles. Here's how a fresh early example looks. It is based on a real vehicle such as this, a Dutch Thornycroft Antar fully loaded with a tank. Today's replacement parts, a new turret and a new set of rubber tracks, were sourced from Steve Flowers Model Supplies. Originally, the Centurion tank that sits on the back of the transporter was going to be a regular 1-75 series release. However, tooling costs and the price of the rubber tracks meant that it would be too expensive for the range. So the Thornycroft Antar and Sankey trailer were developed in order to release the 3 parts as a major pack set. Every component was painted in military olive green, except for the base piece on the tank. That was gloss black. Trim was added to the tractor for a short while on its headlights and bumper. That would have been seen on earlier models which had knobbly black plastic tyres. Later ones had them swapped for finer treads like on mine. Very early models also had crimped axle ends. The rollers on the tank could be bare metal or later black plastic. There are some examples that were issued with grey plastic rollers, which are rare. Similar to the 25B Volkswagen, this model featured a spelling mistake. Thornycroft printed on the base plate of the tractor is spelt Thorneycroft. It shouldn't have an E between the N and the Y. The model was discontinued in 1966 without a replacement, as the series transitioned to king-size models at the expense of the major packs. The tractor wasn't the only Thornycroft model made by Lesney. If you remember back to January 2023, I restored another major pack model, the M8A Mobile Gas Petrol Tanker. This had a different Thornycroft model truck pulling its trailer, a smaller Nippy, whereas this one is an Antar. It was produced by the British firm between the late 1940s and 1964. The company itself was established as the Thornycroft Steam Carriage and Van Company in 1896 by naval engineer John Isaac Thornycroft. He exhibited his first vehicle that year, a marine launch-type boiler-powered 1-ton steam van. By 1907, the company had switched to internal combustion engine propulsion. The company's Basingstoke factory would produce 5,000 vehicles for the World War I effort. It also provided engines to government departments during this time, in addition to the marine engines for the existing Thornycroft shipbuilding operation. The company continued to be utilised for military operations in World War II. They developed the Terrapin amphibious support vehicle, which first saw service in 1944. After the war, to differentiate from the shipbuilding arm, the company name was changed to Transport Equipment, Thornycroft in parentheses, Limited. Until 1961, when it was taken over by AEC's parent company Associated Commercial Vehicles, Thornycroft had produced buses, coaches and lorries. In their earliest days, they also produced cars. After this takeover, however, production was limited to just the Antar, Big Ben and Nubian trucks. AEC utilised Thornycroft's 6-speed constant mesh gearboxes in its vehicles, and then in Leyland vehicles following their takeover of ACV in 1962. Leyland already had Scammell as their specialist vehicle unit. This meant by 1969, production at the Basingstoke factory had stopped and moved to Scammell in Watford. The factory did continue to manufacture gearboxes before the firm was sold to the Eaton Corporation in 1972 and ceased operations in 1977. The Antar was a heavy-duty 6x4 tractor first developed for civilian oilfield operations, transporting pipes over rough terrain. Its name was a reference to Antara ibn Shaddad, a pre-Islamic poet-warrior. The intended main customer for the Antar was the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which would later form the modern BP. It was originally called the Mighty Antar until the Mark III model was introduced. The Rover Company acquired the rights to take over the manufacture of all Rolls-Royce Merlin V12 aero engines, as used in the Hurricane, Lancaster and Spitfire, among others, plus its diesel Meteor derivative, which was used in tanks. Rover cut this Meteor version down to a V8 and supplied it to Thornycroft to use in their early Antars. It was called the Meteorite. By 1951, when Antars began being supplied to the British Army, a petrol version had been developed. These 18-litre petrol versions produced 260 horsepower, giving the Antar a top speed of 28 miles per hour. Early Army Antars were ballast tractors and towed Dyson 50-ton trailers capable of carrying the new, heavier Centurion tanks. A 20-ton winch was fitted to the rear of the tractor cab to assist in loading the tank. A new version of the Antar was developed that could tow a semi-trailer using a swan neck design and is what this model is representative of. Early trailers had a 60-ton capacity and had 16 wheels, but it was later refined to have smaller wheels and a 50-ton capacity. These were manufactured by Taskers or Sankey, the latter being the same as our model. These began being introduced into service in 1953, replacing the American Diamond Ts which had been used during the Second World War. During the Cold War, the Antar was mainly used as support for armoured regiments of the British Army of the Rhine based in West Germany. You can see footage of these at work in the video outro. In the early 60s, the Mark III Antar was introduced to support the increasing weight of the later Centurion tanks and in preparation for the new Chieftain tank. These had a narrower bonnet, as instead of the Meteorite V8, it used a Rolls-Royce Straight 8. Power on this 16.2 litre unit was up to 333 brake horsepower. The top speed was now 35 miles per hour. The Mark III used either a 50 or 60 ton semi-trailer, or it could also be used as a ballast tractor to haul the 50 ton Dyson trailer. Thornycroft also produced the C60 or R6 version, which was essentially their left-hand drive export model in most instances. This had a 6-cylinder turbocharged diesel Rolls-Royce C-Range engine producing 300 horsepower. The ballast body was not removable, unlike on the Mark III. By the late 60s, it was fast becoming evident that the Antar was an old design and needed replacing, even with its engine upgrades. There was also concern as, by now, Thornycroft had been absorbed into AEC and then Leyland, meaning spare parts would become scarce. Still, the Antar would remain in active service until 1984, with its replacement, the Scammell Commander, first arriving on the 30th of March that year. Briefly, Sankey was the trailer manufacturer outlined on the bottom of the model. They were founded in the late 19th century by steel manufacturing entrepreneur Joseph Sankey. They produced tea trays, but soon began supplying steel to the burgeoning car industry. Sankey developed pressed steel wheels to replace the wooden wheels on early cars. Production on those began in 1908 with customers including Austin & Morris and later Daimler and Rover. After iron and steel manufacturer John Lysort & Co. purchased Joseph Sankey & Sons Limited, GKN would acquire both companies in 1920, leading to Sankey operations being known as GKN Sankey. By the 1960s, in addition to trailers, the company was manufacturing other automotive components, such as the chassis for the Triumph Herald. They also developed the FV432 armoured personnel carrier for the British Army. Over time, the Sankey name gradually fell out of use, while GKN continues as a multinational automobile and aerospace components business to date. And lastly, a brief word on the Mark III Centurion. I'm sure there's plenty of videos out there providing a more in-depth history, but the Centurion was the primary main battle tank of the British Army post-World War II. It entered service in 1946 and would remain in production until the 1960s, making it one of the most successful post-war tank designs. It saw combat into the 1980s, and its chassis has been developed into other roles, some of which remain in service to date. The Mark III in particular was upgunned from 17 to 20 pounder ordnance, or 17.6 to 84mm. It had a slightly shortened hull, and its weight increased from 47 to 49 tons. It was now fitted with a 2-inch mortar that was loaded and fired from within the turret. The Mark III was introduced in 1948 and ran until the Mark V was introduced in 1955. The Mark IV was a howitzer project that was never built. 4,423 Centurions were built between 1946 and 1962, consisting of 13 basic marks and numerous variants. In the British Army, it was replaced by the Chieftain in 1967. And with that, we have about completed this Major Pack perk up, as I rebuild the Centurion, using two 3mm M2 screws. Here's how the M3 Tank Transporter Major Pack that Tony sent me looked before I set about restoring it. The tractor had a bent chassis and base, the trailer rusted axles, while the tank was absent of its turret and tracks. Besides that, the paint was pretty flaky across the board. All of my military makeovers since the channel started have been in Tamiya's TS5 Olive Drab, and this is how it looks in it. I'd say that new paint is a major improvement. I'm glad that I didn't go with the silver trim on the cab either. It just doesn't fit on military models. The tank has been fitted with its reproduction turret, which is accurate if a little pitted. It is so often the case with recast parts like this. However, I'm happy to report that the rubber tracks are excellent. I unseized the rusty axles, but there was barely any axle left to secure the wheels back onto them. They're really long and I had no suitable spares to hand. All of the wheels on the 6x4 tractor now also touch the ground after some gentle amendments, with a hammer. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this restoration by leaving a like, hitting that subscribe button, and dropping your thoughts in the comments. Let me know which military vehicle you'd like to see me do next. But all that leaves me to say is thanks for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.